back, Travel Warriors. This is Steve.
And I'm George.
Today, our first episode was about how we met, and now we're going to talk about some of our first projects out on the road.
Sure. Why and what led us to become travel warriors? And I know, Steve, you talked about how you started in the 90s. Why don't you walk us through how you got started?
I actually am a California transplant. I've been living in Arizona since '92, and I came here in search of a entry-level career that I was having trouble finding in San Diego in the late '80s. So a good friend of mine suggested to come to Arizona because it had a lot of veterans in it. It had a lot of opportunities, particularly if you were bilingual. And so I took that and ran with it. I came out and I interviewed for a job. I was hired for a company that was in the commercial storage space, and I worked in their customer service insurance division. So basically, I was placing policies for people who would put their personal contents in a mini storage and all over the country. And I would, they had a pamphlet or a brochure, and they would give me the code, and I could look up. And that actually is what started it, because I was getting calls from the field, from storage facilities all over the U.S., and from people that wanted a quote on their storage insurance. So when I would ask them, okay, can you read off the code, et cetera, and I would get, Hollywood, California, Downers Grove, Illinois, Miami, Florida. That just started, I don't know, I started thinking about those cities. Mm-hmm. So consequently, one of the persons working at this company, really nice lady, I got to speaking with her, and I got to know a little bit more about her job. She seemed to be, I used to see her, sparingly around in the company. And then I asked her what she actually did, and she told me that she basically traveled all over the U.S. all year long, attending trade shows and symposiums and things like this in that industry. And I just kind of like, wow, it just blew me away. I thought, wow, a job where you can actually travel all over the country and meet people, and every day is a little bit different and all that. So that was something that in my adult life, in the early '90s, when I moved to Arizona, started getting me really seriously thinking about maybe trying to find something that had some travel involved in the position. But going back even further, as I dial it back, I distinctly remember one day in the apartment where my mom and I lived in San Francisco, where I was born and raised. It was a rainy January day. It rained all day, and it was a gloomy day, and I just could see the rain coming down. And I remember that moment, that day vividly. I had this intensity of thought of what it would be like traveling to other places, and I just got stuck in that moment, and it was just like it would just loop itself, And I never forgot that day, even to this day. I think about that day, looking out the little window and looking at the rain fall down. And so I think that is really the moment where, like, I was really concentrating on traveling, hoping that someday I would be able to. And then if you move that moment forward, that conversation with this lady who worked at the same company, telling me that she traveled all over the U.S., and it just, I don't know, it just hit me. And so that's when in 1996, I saw an opportunity. I already had an insurance background, and they were looking for an insurance consultant that was able to travel nationally for extended periods of time. And I mean, it was like I was on that so quickly. And to make a long story short, I was able to interview very quickly. I was basically escorted to the owner's office, and I had a conversation with him, and I got hired the same day. And so that's where it started for me. That was my foot in the door.
When you first got started, where did you go? Was there a place that you went or stood out to you that one of your first trips?
Well, I recall I got hired in June of '96. And this is a slow, in the business that I was in, it was a slow time of the year. There wasn't so much travel during the summertime because most of the projects were leaning heavy in the fourth quarter of the year. So I had to wait until August and to take my first trip. And I just remember I went to Waukesha, Wisconsin. It was like one of the major hospitals there. And I got picked. I didn't get my own rental car. I was the new guy, and so we stayed in Waukesha, and I got picked up, and we went every day to the hospital for 6 or 8 hours. It was kind of a passive project, but it got me into see firsthand the operations and some of the expectations of what I would be doing. And so I was kind of paired up with two guys that had been doing this for a few years. They were both one I think was from Wisconsin, the other from Minneapolis. And these guys were young, and these guys were, well, they were a little bit younger than me, but these guys were party animals. I mean, they were going to a place called the Bicycle Bombay Club or something like that. It was like a TGIF restaurant with a big old bicycle in front of it. And these guys were out there as soon as they got in from the hospital. They were at the happy hour. They wouldn't get back till 1, 2 in the morning. I don't know how they got up in the morning. But that was my first experience, Waukesha, Wisconsin. And I can tell you of the two places, well, there's more than two. Obviously, there's got to be 5 or 6 places where I met some of the nicest people. Wisconsin, Oklahoma, where you're from, Austin, Texas, when I got to go out there in the mid '80s. Just great memories, great people. And so that was my first my first trip in Waukesha. And then basically from there, we were working with some guys that were developing business for our company in the Midwest. And then I started going to Chicago. And so what I can say is that you can go to Chicago 10 different times, 10 in a row, and have 10 different experiences. And that's what I experienced, just being, um, working in Woodstock, working in Evanston, working near the Gold Coast, working downtown, working in South Chicago. I mean, those trips all got me a little bit um, indoctrinated in the life of preparing and being ready for just about any place or any situation. What about you, George?
I got started really when I was born. My mom always said that I was born with a suitcase in my hand. My mom traveled a lot, and my dad worked for American Airlines, so I was very, very fortunate at a young age to be able to travel. Um, However, when I got into my late teens, school, starting a career, that sort of went out the window, and so I spent a lot of my 20s here in Oklahoma. Um, working a cubicle job, and it kind of came to a head um, in my late 20s, around the year 2002. I enjoyed the job itself. Um, I really did enjoy helping people, but I remember this, it was in August of that year, and I remember Steve, and we were kind of slow that month. So, I was working in a call center. No calls were coming in. They were very strict on doing other stuff. You couldn't get on the internet and stuff like that. And so I remember sitting in the cubicle thinking, like, what has happened to me? Where was that guy that used to travel as a kid and got to visit some pretty cool places? And here I am for the last decade or so, just stuck. And I remember sort of sitting there and almost like in tears, like somehow, is there some way, I was almost praying, can I find a travel job? Something where I can get out. I was also, feeling stuck living here in Oklahoma. I wanted to experience something else. And, if I can find that. And, kind of interesting is, uh, you know, fast forward, 12 months later, it happened. With the job that I was in, I didn't realize you can also travel with it. There was a gentleman there at work who was who was Spanish speaking. I didn't realize at the time he was like gone like half the month, right? So in January of 2003, the company I was working for went under, and I was just like really at a crossroads in my life, and that gentleman ended up calling me and said, "Hey, George," and not only me, but several people there at the company. And he kind of told me, "Hey, you can do this job. I know you enjoy helping people, but you can do it traveling." I was like, "What? You can do this traveling?" Had no idea. And so, I got a few assignments locally, in Oklahoma, driving. I think one time went to Dallas, but really my first project that I always think back to was in August of 2003. Was working in Jacksonville, Florida, and it was 12 months after I was sitting in that cubicle, you know, um, that it changed. And so about that time is when we started speaking on the phone. Then I was going to meet you in October in Palm Desert. But really, uh, I call it trip or work trip is going to Jacksonville. If I can tell a funny little story, a coworker that worked with me, we were both on this assignment in Jacksonville, and we were so excited. I remember, getting to the airport, getting our rental cars. It was pretty warm. You're there even in Jacksonville, and in August it's pretty warm, and we wanted to eat some seafood. So we went to a seafood restaurant that afternoon, and we were eating outside, and we ordered shrimp and fish and whatever, and all of a sudden, for those that live in Florida, that afternoon rainstorm, that clouds that start coming in, right? And we didn't know, and it started pouring. We didn't even care. We just kept on eating. Everyone cleared out on the deck, and we were the only ones. Two people from Oklahoma, right there on the water eating, and that's one of the great memories I have in starting. Into the travel business.
Well, George, I hadn't been to Chicago, to the Midwest, and when I first started in this career, and I got paired up, which I will introduce now. Her name was Gigi. She was a retired bookkeeper from Chicago, and she was a lady that would tell you all the stories of Mayor Daley and where he lived and the culture of Chicago and all the neighborhoods and how one ethnic group would push the other out and all this kind of thing. And it was so fascinating to me. She was both, I would say, both a mentor and then later became what you and I call a road mom.
Mm-hmm.
Someone that has the wisdom, the sensibilities, the experience that can kind of, you can always learn from. And so I spent several years shortly after I started, after that Wisconsin trip, going to Chicago, working at different companies. I remember one company, they made, I don't know if, those old photo albums with the plastic sheets. They
Mm-hmm.
actually, this
Mm-hmm.
was the tail end of that industry.
Oh, okay.
And so we would go into, for lunch, you knew the neighborhood. We would go into this tiny little Puerto Rican restaurant. She was Puerto Rican. And where they would just get a bucket and put the rice on the plate and the pork chops. And it was just, oh, it was so, I looked forward to lunch every day working on that project with her. But a funny story is the first trip that I went out to Chicago, and I met up with her. I had gone to the store. I had bought these black patent leather shoes, and I didn't know what it was like to be in a snowy area. This was in the fall. I mean, this was actually in the winter. And besides going to Reno, to Lake Tahoe, and to Truckee, California, um, I had never really been exposed to being out in the snow. So I'm getting with my black shiny first day. I meet up with her and we're going out to the work site and we can't find, literally this place was like a campus. I mean, you couldn't even find the front door. I mean, this is what a rookie I was. I couldn't even find the entrance. It was so big. It had multiple buildings in a campus setting. and there's snow piled around the doorways and the front of the building. And I'm walking around. I can't, this door won't open, that door won't open. By lunchtime, Gigi looks at my shoes and starts cracking up because there's like a salt stain around the edge of the shoes all the way around. And she goes, "Are those shoes brand new?" And I had paid a lot of money for those shoes, and you just ruined a pair of $130 shoes. And she just cracked up. And so that was just one of my initiations into learning how and what to wear when you're in Chicago in the wintertime and you're in business attire. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was just some great memories of being out in Chicago. And like I said, my experience in Chicago was several years, probably 3 or 4 years. I was going there twice, maybe 3 times per year in Chicago.
Mm.
So I would say Chicago was my proving ground for me to get my initial experience as a consultant, meeting with employees and traveling around and that kind of thing. And Chicago was the first place where I experienced actually driving in the winter. And back then we had like MapQuest or something like that, or you had these map books and stuff like that. I remember I missed my exit, and it literally took me, I lost a half an hour. You lose your exit in the winter in Chicago, you just lost a half an hour of your time. So the thing about Chicago, traveling there in the wintertime, you always had to pad a lot of extra time just because of the traffic and the snow and the tolls and parking was always a challenge in Chicago at these locations and that kind of thing. So what other cities besides Jacksonville? Basically, what was the kickoff cities for you besides Jacksonville?
Well, that fall of 2003, so from Jacksonville, supposed to go across the state or to Tampa. Um, and matter of fact, that was somewhere I was looking to move to at the time. It was very similar in size to Tulsa, here in Oklahoma, and had some sports teams in the water. And so I was very looking forward to going there again, like a place that I may want to move to. And I was supposed to spend, I think, 6 to 8 weeks. At the very last second, they switched me to San Francisco. And so I ended up working in the Bay Area. I worked very close um, to Cal Berkeley. So I wasn't in San Francisco, I was across the bridge. And so I was there for several weeks. And then from there, I transitioned down to the San Bernardino area. And then that's when I met you. And then you were still working, I think, most of part of November in Palm Desert. So I was working there. And then from there, I think November and December, you had me, if I remember right, in Ohio, and then in Missouri. And so that kind of finished out that 2003. So it went from, Jacksonville, California, and ended up in a small town in Missouri. So, as you know, when you're traveling, and for business, you can be in the biggest city or you can be in the smallest town. So, I know we'll talk about that in future episodes. Big city versus small towns and what it's like. So, um, speaking of some trips, Steve, I believe you do have an upcoming trip coming. You want to share with us?
Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm heading out with my son to Mexico City. This will be my second visit. I was there actually in March of 2019, and that was actually the last month that Southwest Airlines was traveling into Mexico City. And of course, I
Mm.
had a lot of Southwest reward points banked at the time, and I thought, well, let's go to Mexico City because I've been on this kick about trying to visit all of the world cities, and Mexico City definitely is a global world city. So over 20 million people, and so I was very excited. And the way I researched, knowing where I wanted to stay, was that the UFC, which I'm a big fan of, and
Mm-hmm.
this is one of the primary reasons why we're going to Mexico City, because there's an event called the Fight Night Mexico City, which will be on February 24th. And so a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I was watching a little snippet video of the actual the fighter hotel, with the fighters interacting with each other, practicing in the ballrooms. And then I was able to figure out from the backdrop of the ballrooms and the carpeting and I was able to do some research and found out that they were staying at the JW Marriott. So I said, that's where we need to stay, at the JW Marriott, because the UFC is going to select a hotel that's probably close to the venue where they're going to have their event, and it's going to be a good hotel, et cetera, et
Mm-hmm.
cetera. And I couldn't have been more right. JW Marriott, March of 2019, in an area called the Polanco, which is a very upscale area, and it has a little bit of everything. And so I told my son, hey, the next time there's a UFC event in Mexico City, we are going to attend. So think about 2019, now moving forward, it's 2024, and it's been several years since they've been there. Now, the JW Marriott has had a renovation. I am just shocked at how expensive. Now, I can tell you, George, that March of 2019, I think a room night at the JW was pretty good. It was probably under $200, I want to say, a night. Now, if you were to look at it today for those dates, in February, late February, you're looking at 400, 500 a night. So that's something that we can talk about later on, is how a $600 to $1,000 a night is now the norm in an upscale four-diamond or four-star hotel, 5-star. So we're heading out. We're going to be staying at the Intercontinental Presidente, and looking forward to staying there, because it's walking distance to a little area called El Polanquito. Let's say San Diego, for instance, as a frame of reference. It's similar to like staying in the Gaslamp Quarter, staying at the Pendry Hotel, where it's anchored by several restaurants, and you can just walk outside and start enjoying, everything that it has to offer, the restaurants, the nightlife, etc. So that's kind of the best way to describe the Polanco, and a couple other neighborhoods called Roma, Condesa. So that's going to be kind of like our command post, what we're going to be hanging out at. And we're just really thrilled and excited. I can't even tell you. It's just a few days away. And I'm already doing my, final packing and all this kind of thing. So we'll report with you if you give us a call. I'm sure we'll carve out some time, and Matt and myself can get on, and you can kind of and get a temperature check on the trip and see how it's going for us.
Absolutely. We'll check in and see how your trip was, and some insight you can share with us.
Absolutely.
Sounds great, Steve. Well, let's kind of wrap this thing up. Any final words?
Well, just we've got the spring just around the corner, so I'm sure people are starting to maybe look at booking some cruises, going on some trips, and just can't wait to get some of the feedback from our audience.
Sounds great. If you guys like what you hear from us, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And we're looking forward to another episode. And Steve down in Mexico City.
Sounds good. Well, we'll see you, Travel Warriors. We'll be back really soon. Thanks for tuning in.
Safe travels, everyone.